Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Good or Bad. Today's movie that we're going to be talking about is a supposedly divisive Christopher Nolan movie, Tenet. It has 70% from critics and a 76% from audiences on Rotten Tomatoes, a 7.5 out of 10 on IMDb, a 69 Metascore, and a 7.2 user score on Metacritic, and a 3.5 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. Lately, Christopher Nolan has been releasing movies that seem to be divisive on a lot of people lately, and Tenet seems to be another one of those movies that's split down the middle as well. So today, I invited a special guest to debate about this, and he's actually the first person that I ever collaborated on YouTube when I first had an old YouTube channel, and that is Dan Jensen from Movie Talk with Dan Jensen. He's one of the few people I've come to know to express how much he didn't necessarily really like this movie, so that gives me just enough reasons on why I wanted him to be on this show to talk about this movie, Tenet. So with that being said, Dan, go ahead and introduce yourself on why you think that this movie can be a good case on why it's actually bad.
What's going on, everybody? And a big thank you to Chandler for having me on this video. It's been way too long since we've done any sort of a collab together, but yeah, really appreciated you summoning me to help you out with this, even if it was for talking about a movie that I didn't really like all that much, and that movie, of course, is Tenet. It's a movie that I've been asked to name 5 things that I didn't like about it, and at first I thought, okay, this is going to be easy. I mean, I didn't like the film, so there's going to be like 100 things, but the first thing that occurred to me was that this was a film I couldn't even really remember. I have seen it once, I saw it when it came out of the movies, but I was struggling to really remember what it was that I didn't like about it. And I watched my own review of the film, funnily enough, and yeah, it brought back a whole bunch of reminders for me, but I think my number one thing is the fact that this film was totally forgettable. I personally couldn't really remember more than a small handful of scenes. I couldn't remember what the plot was or anything. It totally escaped my memory. And that brings me to the second point, which is the story of this thing. I remember seeing the film and there just wasn't really that much of a narrative. Like, I know there was a hero and there was a thing the hero needed to do to stop a villain, but it was just a series of scenes, like this guy traveling from one location to the other, and talking to people and stuff, and yeah, it just didn't really have an interesting narrative for me. That now brings me to number 3, which was the characters in this film. I mean, our main protagonist was called the protagonist. Like, what the hell? This guy, he didn't have a name. He wasn't relatable in any sort of way because he had no backstory. You know, you knew nothing about this guy. Robert Pattinson's character, any of the characters, you didn't really know enough about them to really be invested in them. I mean, in my review, I compared this to a character like John McClane, who was an everyman who you could relate to, and you knew his backstory, and you knew, like, why he was emotionally in this story. Whereas the protagonist was just there, you know? He was just sort of thrown into it, and off he goes, doing his thing. So what? You know, why should we care about this character? But then on a technical level, we've also got things like editing and continuity, which is my 4th point. The editing in this movie was really, really bad. Like, there were scenes where 2 people were talking and, like, it was just sort of cutting too quickly between everybody, and, like, the continuity was really bad. If you look at one scene in particular in a restaurant where 2 people are talking, and I think it was a woman, like, what she was doing with her glass between shots was like changing every time and stuff. Like, it was an absolute mess. So on a technical level, I don't think it was a very well-crafted film. But overall, the main point of contention that I had with Tenet, I know Christopher Nolan is notorious for doing puzzle films, you know, films that you require a hell of a lot of thought and a lot of like cerebral investment into what's going on. And I got no problem with intellectual films. I got no problem with films that require a lot of thought trying to figure them out. This movie, though, went way too far as I'm concerned. And I know there's a lot of Nolan fans themselves who also think that this was almost like a parody of a Christopher Nolan film, in that it was too convoluted, it was too complex. This film was just a complete mess for me. It was technically poorly crafted. I couldn't get on board with the characters and the story. I have forgotten all about it. And quite frankly, I am glad that I have forgotten about this film. So there you go. That's 5 things of what I didn't like about Tenet. So yes, once again, Chandler, thank you very much for having me on board this video. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, back to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dan, for being a part of this video and for collaborating once again with me. If you guys haven't checked out his YouTube channel, be sure to check it out. I'll put it down in the description box below. And now it's time for me to play devil's advocate and talk about why I think that Tenet is actually a good movie. Now, do I actually think that this is a good movie? Well, I will admit that this film does have certain flaws. In fact, it probably has more flaws than probably some of Christopher Nolan's other movies that he's created, but this one in particular was definitely one of my favorites in the year 2020, and I do think that this is one of Nolan's better movies that he has recently released, at least when it comes to The Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, and even Dunkirk. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give you guys 4 reasons why I would say that Tenet is actually a good movie. And the first thing that I want to point out is that I thought Christopher Nolan's concept on how to do time travel is really freaking clever. Christopher Nolan has been known to be that filmmaker on how to think outside of the box and how to entertain people and mesmerize them on screen with the type of concepts that he has created and transitioning those concepts into a fantastic visual medium. And I felt like this kind of concept that he came up with in Tenet was honestly really good. And the way that he delves into time travel on how a character can move backwards, how one character can move forwards even though there's backwards motion that's going on, how one person would have to react backwards while they're in the present and moving forwards, and how it can make a character just be one step ahead whenever they are playing the game. It's so strategic and so in detailed about how all of this works that it's really fascinating to look into. Plus, I really like it when Nolan does these types of concepts because it does inspire other filmmakers to create so much imagination and utilize it to their abilities on how to make movies mesmerizing and entertaining on every single level. Number 2, the visuals and the action. Of course, because this is a Christopher Nolan movie and because the concept of it is time travel, you can tell that he has paid special attention to every single shot and every single movement, and it always keeps your curiosity going, and it's so mesmerizing. It's never boring. The most exciting thing about this movie is that because there is a lot of information and you don't know what's going on, but you do actually like seeing what is happening and you do like seeing these actors play these characters, you are curious to figure out what's going to happen and you have no idea what's going to happen in the long run. So not only is the action in here really mesmerized because of all the action that's going in backwards and forwards, but it's also very intense because you have no idea what's going to happen at the very end. And when you do rewatch the movie and you do finally get to understand everything that's going on in here, you actually get to see a lot more of the crazy insights that Christopher Nolan is actually doing when you are watching this movie. Number 3, the casting in here. If there's something that I do trust with Christopher Nolan is that while he doesn't necessarily do a great job on creating memorable characters, he does do a great job on casting very famous actors and also really memorable actors that do a good job on keeping up the pace of this movie and have you with them the entire time they're on screen. The writing in here doesn't necessarily give in a lot of personality towards these characters, but Nolan relies on the actors to supply in the personality traits, and within the actor's job, they have the ability to supply in the likability factors. And I feel like that these actors really do make the movie really worth the watch. I think Robert Pattinson does a great job captivating me and keeping my interest on the screen. John David Washington is a really good actor. I definitely want to see more of the other stuff he does in other movies, but he does a fantastic job being the protagonist. Yeah, they literally do say that in this film. But I think he does a great job being a protagonist inside of this movie. Elizabeth Debicki does a great job as well. I don't necessarily know about Kenneth Branagh. I hope I pronounced his last name correctly. The way they portrayed his character was a little over the top. He was kind of hammering it in, and I felt like that Nolan wanted us to take this character in seriously, and it didn't necessarily work that well. But I enjoyed all these actors' presence on screen, and I felt like they carried this movie through for the type of concept that this movie was going for, and it was really awesome to see what kind of acting capabilities they were capable of doing. And the last thing that I want to point out is the crazy world building that Christopher Nolan created inside this movie. Now, the thing that I find most odd that I don't think a lot of people usually talk about is that while Christopher Nolan does do a lot of exposition in his movies, some of the fun of his films is how the movie works. Inception, I love that movie because of the concept itself of people going inside of dreams and how they work. The movie Inception, I think, is Christopher Nolan's best film, not just because of the concept, but because of how it works. Which is the same way of how I feel about The Prestige and The Dark Knight and Batman Begins, and it's also the same with Tenet. That's kind of what makes Christopher Nolan movies so fascinating to watch. As much as we don't like all of the constant explanation and all of the tiresome monologues and speeches that he loves giving out inside of his movies, they definitely do lead into some fascinating insights as to how this movie and how this world building actually does work and why it's so interesting to watch. It's really popcorn entertainment, even though you don't realize it. Whether it's through Christopher Nolan's exposition-heavy writing or the concept itself or through the visual medium, however he wants to deliver this type of insight is so mesmerizing and insane that I just want to keep watching it over and over again so that I can figure out what in the world this type of movie is. And that's why I always like watching a Christopher Nolan movie overall. So there you go, guys. That was my defense case on why I think that Tenet is actually a good movie. I mean, no, it's not necessarily one of Nolan's best films. I do think that it's one of his better movies that he has released recently, but it's definitely not going to top like Inception or The Dark Knight or any of those movies, in all honesty. So thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you, Dan Jensen, for being a part of this video. Again, be sure to go ahead and subscribe to his YouTube channel. What do you guys think about this movie? Do you actually like it or dislike it? Put it down in the comment section below, and let's start a conversation about it. And like this video if you agree with what I say, or dislike this video if you disagree with what I say. I don't mind the dislikes. So that is it I have for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be sure to see you in the next video.